All the best to us.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Samruddhi Prabhudesai, and I'm pursuing MSc in Mental Health Counseling.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Ishita, and I'm pursuing MSc in Clinical Psychology. And today with us, we have our lovely speaker, Dr. Abha Bang Soni. She's going to address our topic anxiety today, and she has pursued her MBBS, that is Bachelor of Medicine, followed by Diploma in Psychological Medicine. Later, she did her Doctor of Medicine from Nagpur and is now working as a consultant psychiatrist at Brahma Hospital. It's an outpatient facility that's based in Nagpur itself. She's also a director and consultant in Asan Hospital. That's an inpatient facility for people who suffer from mental illness, and also alongside she's a trainer with Niche Advocacy Foundation. She's also a speaker at academic and non-academic forums that intend to raise awareness for mental health. So welcome, ma'am, and thank you so much for willing to be, part of our initiative. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ishita. Thank you for the kind introduction. A pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Welcome, ma'am. Now that we've done that, I think let's just quickly catch up on why we've chosen anxiety as a topic today.
Right.
Before I proceed, I just want to make sure my voice is clear to everybody, right?
Something is echoing, which I am not understanding what it is.
Yeah, there's some background echo after everyone speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Because I before we proceed, I just want to make sure that okay, now it's not echoing. Now it's better. Okay, perfect. Now that we've had that sorted for now, why we've chosen anxiety as a topic? So basically, anxiety, as we discussed in our last live, is one of the most common mental illnesses that is out there. And we've asked a lot of people for suggestions as to what they would want us to take as a topic in our next live. The most common response that we got was how about you do something about anxiety? You can speak about that. So I think that is the main reason that we took up anxiety. And also in this situation of COVID, I think almost every other individual, there's a possibility that they're going through a lot of anxiousness and stress, panic. So just like, understanding how different stress is from anxiety and what anxiety really is, what stress is really. So we're just going to look through that. And I think that's why we chose anxiety as our topic today.
So now that we understood why we chose our topic, let's dive right into it. We have prepared a set of questions we'll be asking ma'am one by one. So let's say the very first question that I'm going to ask is, what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Thank you, Ishita. That's actually the most often asked questions. I'm sure it is thrown at both psychologists and psychiatrists, right? So the most clear distinction is psychiatry is basically a specialization that you do after having done a bachelor's in medicine. So it's a specialization that a doctor gets to do. Like, let's say, surgery, medicine, gynecology, or pediatrics. It's like right up there. Whereas psychology is a graduate degree that you take, which is not related to medicine per se, but it's a paramedical field which helps professionals dealing with patients who have milder cases of mental illnesses, which can be dealt with therapy, counseling, and where we will need some amount of testing. So it's a liaison work that psychologists and psychiatrists do together. Since psychiatry is a specialization after medicine, we can prescribe medications for more severe disorders because we have studied the human body in detail and we know how those medications affect and side effects, along with the psychological aid that we can give.
Right.
Especially in India, given the very low proportion of mental health workers, both psychiatrists and psychologists that we have, the work kind of gets cut out for both differently.
Right.
So, a lot of psychiatrists are unable to do detailed therapy sessions or detailed testing, which is taken care of by our psychological colleagues, colleagues or psychologists, whereas we deal with more severe patients who will require medical therapy.
Right.
So, it's a hand in hand thing, but two very different branches of getting there.
So they work in collaboration with patients.
Yes, they work in collaboration. True.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for addressing that, ma'am. Now that we've understood the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, I think the next natural question is when should one approach a psychiatrist and when should one approach a psychologist?
Right. So, like I was just saying, since psychologists are used to doing more counseling and therapy, which usually works for the milder to moderate cases of mental illnesses, whether it's anxiety or depression, or even in mental illnesses with children. So, psychologists would usually be approached in the initial stages of an illness when you have not had your biological functions being affected, like if your sleep appetite is not very disturbed but it's your thoughts or your daily functioning only that is being affected, and when it goes to a more severe extent, when your biological functions start getting affected, your sleep appetite, and you're having more thoughts that are dangerous either to you or to people around you, that is a time when you have to see a psychiatrist. A lot of times we get patients referred from psychologist to psychiatrist or from our other medical colleagues also who sent us. So it depends on what stage you recognize your mental illness at. At an earlier stage, yes, even for school-going children, for certain testing, a psychologist would be the right person to approach. But for higher, more severe cases where medication might be required, a psychiatrist would be the right person to approach.
Right. Thank you for addressing that question.
Sure.
Let's move on to now. What is really anxiety?
Right. So, a lot of times people confuse anxiety with normal stresses that we have in life every day. All of us go through anxiety as a normal emotion throughout our lifetime, throughout our day, for simple situations like, let's say, a big upcoming exam, or a public speaking thing like the event that we're having now, or just a job interview, or normal stresses of life. That is not clinically anxiety in the terms of medicine. That's stress. But when we talk of anxiety disorders or as a medical condition, it is something, it's a pervasive, excessive worry that colors your entire day. uh, पूरे दिन आपका माइंड उसी में लगा रहता है, इट गेट्स स्टक समवेयर ऑन अ कॉर्ड, और वो छोटी छोटी चीजें हो सकती है विच यू लॉजिकली रियलाइज कि इज नॉट समथिंग दैट शुड कॉज दैट मच स्ट्रेस, एंड शायद मैक्सिमम लोगों को नहीं भी स्ट्रेस आउट करती हो, बट यू कांट लेट दैट गो, and that starts hampering your concentration, that starts hampering aapka day to day routine, your ability to function to your best potential, and then eventually it colors all the domains of your life, whether it's sleep, whether it's appetite, whether it's your work, whether it's pleasure, everything. And there are various kinds of anxiety disorders, but this is the basis, underlying basic of all of those different anxiety disorders. And along with these mental or thought disturbances, some physical changes that people experience when they go through anxiety disorders are suddenly feeling palpitations, आपकी धड़कनें बढ़ जाएंगी, आपके हाथ में ट्रेमर्स आ सकते हैं, आप स्वेट बहुत कर सकते हैं सिचुएशंस में, आपको ब्रीदिंग डिफिकल्टीज फील हो सकती है, देयर कुड बी मोमेंट्स व्हेन यू कुड फील वेरी वेरी एक्सट्रीम पैनिकी एंड फील वेरी चोकिंग लाइक सेंसेशंस. सम पीपल हैव कॉमन जीआई डिस्टर्बेंसेस, एसिडिटी बहुत बढ़ जाती है, या फिर uncomfortableness, tingling in their extremities. तो ये सारे are varied symptom spectrum of anxiety that is there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, ma'am. I would like to point out that we had requested people if they had any questions or queries regarding anxiety, so they can come up with those. We already have questions where people have come up to us and they wanted us to include these in our life.
Right.
As for people who may not have approached us but still wish to, you can drop in your queries and questions in the comments. And if you wish to be anonymous, I think you can contact either Ishita, me, or ma'am via Facebook Messenger, and we can address your question without, of course, revealing your identity.
Right.
Pertaining to the question that we were asked to include, the first one is, can an individual be prone to anxiety?
Yes, definitely. So, although anxiety is one of the most common mental illnesses, there are certain risk factors that put people to be more vulnerable to anxiety. One of the major ones is genes. It is one of a kind of heritable disease. There is some genetic linkage to anxiety disorders. So, if you have had a family history of any kind of mental illness, especially anxiety disorder, so there are higher chances that you might have anxiety. Then environmental causes in terms of trauma, especially childhood trauma, or if you have had some major incident in your life that has been severely disturbing and unexpected and sudden, it can make you prone for anxiety disorders. There are certain personality types which we commonly broadly categorize into type A and type B people. Type A people are people who are more aggressive, more out there, more active, and they tend to be a little more anxious also. So they tend to have anxiety disorders more commonly as compared to the type B people who are more happy-go-lucky or relaxed kind of people. Both personalities will have their plus and minus, but this is something that makes them a little more prone. Then people who abuse substances can also be prone to anxiety disorders more regularly. People who use, I mean, that's a different category, substance-induced anxiety disorder. But yes, it does tend to happen. So, biological causes, environmental causes, and social causes, all of these causes could make you more vulnerable to anxiety disorders.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, the next question that we got was, it is normally said a very sensitive person is more prone to anxiety. Is it true or false? Would you like to comment?
Right. So, people do tend to be a little more prone to both anxiety as well as depression because they tend to take comments given to them or things happening around them a little more at heart. They tend to let that affect them a lot more. But having said that, sometimes sensitive people are able to sense earlier what things are anxiety provoking for them and are better able to prevent it also. So it's a more individualized case rather than a general broad category. Uh, there is another, when I was talking about personality types A and B, there's another classical division of personalities where when we talk of personality disorders, which is into A, B, and C, and the personality C type of disorder, which are the avoidant dependent type of personalities. Those personalities tend to be sensitive and sometimes tend to be anxious also, but not necessarily will have an anxiety disorder per se. Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Thank you, ma'am. I
Yeah.
think addressing questions from our viewers for now. The last one being how to dissuade people, especially elders or people who are senior in age, from sort of getting into over anxiousness.
Right. See, this is something that, first of all, we need to understand. It's very hard to change somebody else, whoever it is, even if it's your parents, it's your best friend, anybody. So, first of all, you need to recognize that anxiety could be just a part of their personality or upbringing. Like a lot of people who are from the older generation, like the question says, are little perfectionists. They like to do things in a certain way, in a certain order, as compared to, let's say, the younger generation who's a little more relaxed for different things. And they tend to, by virtue of being our carers and guardians, tend to worry a lot more about us tend to always view us as somebody who's not mature enough or old enough to be able to handle themselves. And that is what mainly creates or stems their anxiety from. Now, the more you try to talk to them and try to convince them, the more doubts it raises in your minds. Like it said, actions speak louder than words. If you can show responsible behavior, if you can, keep up to your promises, that will be more convincing for them to worry less. And as parents, they are going to worry, especially in times like these, in COVID times, when you are far away, probably. Like I think in case of Samruddhi, she's quite far away from her parents, versus
My
when you're
mother is
sitting.
watching this live and she's going to freak out.
No, so they do worry because that's part of, it's an extension of care and love that they have for you. So you need to be a little accepting of that worry. You shouldn't get irritated by it that much because, like I said, controlling your own reactions and emotion is much more in your control as compared to the other person's. And you can rationally and logically try and allay whatever anxiety you can, but after a point of time, you have to let go. You have to kind of let go. And if you feel that it is clinically affecting them functioning wise, then it will be better if they can see a professional, whether it's a counseling session that they can take, or depending on how severely it is affecting them, if medications are required, they could be referred to a psychiatrist. But it has to be a very individualized case rather than a general rule.
Right. There's another question from our viewers. Is high performing anxiety an actual concept?
Actually, high performing anxiety is something that is a corporate term that has come up. It's not a clinical term per se to say, but the type A personalities that I was talking about, they tend to fit in that high performance anxiety zone, because they have a lot more competitive edge to whatever they're doing. And they tend to keep very high standards for themselves, which sometimes might not be very realistic goals or very realistic standards, because they completely and judge themselves and accordingly plan things. And yes, so we are seeing people in the corporate zone getting quite anxious, and that anxiety spills to other zones. We will clinically term it as a generalized anxiety disorder, but yes, in the corporate world, it will be called a high performance anxiety. Yeah.
Sam, let's move on with our set of questions.
Sure.
Uh, okay, so how to dissuade people, especially senior citizens, parents, etc., from being over anxious?
I think we just took that question
Yeah,
from
the
Samruddhi.
parents, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
the parents and senior citizens.
uh,
Yeah.
right. What are the types of anxiety disorders?
So classically, we can say anxiety disorders can be broadly divided into seven types. Now, the most common one among them is the generalized anxiety disorder, in which the anxiety pervades your entire life spectrum across all the zones in your life, and it's continuously there throughout the day. It's not like it's in bits and pockets, and anything and everything that you do has that thought going on in your mind. Is it right, is it not right, and is something going wrong, or something will happen wrong, that kind of a disorder. Then there are specific phobias, which are only where the anxiety only presents in specific situations. Either the most common of them is agoraphobia, where people have phobia of being in crowded places, or being alone in a closed space. Basically, essentially, in both situations where they can't get help easily in case something happens. That's what goes in their mind. Supposing I'm in a crowd and I have a heart attack, how will I reach the nearest hospital? I might just get locked in the crowd. Or if I'm alone in a room, same might happen. Might not be able to reach help. Uh, that being the most common is separately categorized, whereas other phobias, like phobias about being in a lift, phobias of height, phobias of reptiles, and stuff like that, those are specific phobias. Then we also have trauma related anxiety. So that is categorized into post traumatic stress disorder and acute traumatic stress disorder, depending on the duration for how long that anxiety is going on, and that anxiety is related to a huge life-threatening traumatic event where people will have flashbacks of that event, nightmares of that event, and will have startle reactions to that event that will happen. Then previously, the obsessive compulsive disorders would also come under anxiety spectrum disorder, because in that there is a continuous thought that is going on in your mind. Even though it is illogical, you realize that it is not something that you want to think about, but it comes automatically and generates a lot of anxiety. For example, you could have thoughts of germs all around you. Even if you've washed your hands like 5 times, you will still not be satisfied that your hands are clean. And we're seeing a lot of that cropping up in these COVID times, because hand washing has now been made compulsory, but some people are going overboard with it. And if you try and stop yourself, then that anxiety builds up in your mind that no, something bad is going to happen and I'm going to contract something. So OCD is another one. Then we also face anxiety disorders in children, which could happen in the form of either separation anxiety, or where the child has an unrealistic amount of anxiety about separation. All children will have some separation anxiety from their parents, but depending on their age and development, that separation anxiety is disproportionate to it. And then we also have something called selective mutism that we can see in children, where in a specific situation only the anxiety builds up so much that they're unable to speak. Usually it happens in school, whereas in all other settings they're able to speak normally. Their vocal apparatus is not affected per se, but it's because of the anxiety that they're unable to speak. And then there are anxiety which are related to your physical bodily changes, which actually comes under a different set of mental disorders but has a huge anxiety component to it. Like illness anxiety disorder, a lot of people will have the anxiety that I have a major disease. Just because I have a headache, I might have a tumor in my brain. Even though they might get 5-7 times imaging done, CT scan done, they will still not be convinced that there is actually nothing there. That anxiety will not let them perform anywhere in whatever forms they want to. And then there is social anxiety, which is also very common, where people are unable to function in a social environment. They will avoid it at all cost, because they feel that they are going to be humiliated and embarrassed if they go, either because they don't appear well or they're doing something wrong. Maybe they feel that they're chewing food too loudly. It could be anything that can go in their mind, but that makes them avoid social situations. So those are the various different kinds of anxiety disorders that we commonly come across.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. You also answered simultaneously in this question. One of the viewers asked, do children suffer from anxiety disorder? So you answered that. Thank you.
And that was a very wholesome response. My God, I mean, thank you so much. I think I easily took Ishita and me back to our third year. I think when we were learning these things, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just hope it wasn't too long. That
I
answer.
think it was informative. I mean, it was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Next question. What are the causes of anxiety?
So like I spoke about the risk factors, the causes are also three-pronged. I'd say there are the biological causes, environmental causes, and social causes to it. Biological causes being certain disturbances in certain brain circuits, which are supposed to help us or make our brain decide how to react in a situation. If those circuits are disturbed or there are chemical changes in those circuits, in very simple layman terms, I'm trying not to go too technical here, then that anxiety will build up. And that is why when the anxiety disorders go to from a moderate or severe stage, any amount of counseling or therapy is not going to work much, because the change has occurred at a biological level. So unless we're able to alter that biology back to the normal state by use of medications, it's difficult for patients to even follow the therapy or counseling homework or stuff that they are being given, because then it goes out of their control, literally. So the brain, our brain has a system which helps us react in cases of normal anxiety in either a fight, flight, or a freeze reaction. Now, if that system goes in an overdrive, So even a normal, small, seemingly non-threatening stimuli can also persistently make you keep going in that loop, and that then creates the downward spiral everywhere, and that is what causes the symptoms. So that is the biological basis. Then when we come to social or environmental causes, like I was saying, a big trauma, whether it's a childhood trauma that has stayed with you or a trauma that has occurred in the recent past which is unexpected, that could lead to it. And or some major financial trouble or something that is unexpected, like these current corona covid times or economic recessions. These could be sudden, unexpected, and out of your hand things that could trigger anxiety. And then there are psychological causes in terms of how you think, what is your thinking style. That is something that majorly psychologists work on. We call them cognitive distortions, in which, because they're quite a lot and going in detail would miss the purpose, but which tend to make you see situations in the wrong way or judge the situations in the wrong way. The most common of it, which I think, I'd like to mention, is what we call masturbation, which means that this should happen, this must happen. We keep setting those things in our mind that, and that's what usually elders also tend to do. That things must happen in this certain way, otherwise things will go wrong. This should be done, otherwise, and things will go wrong. And that's what a lot of times we are taught when we are being brought up also, that you should behave in a certain way, otherwise it will go wrong. And then when you're unable to do it at a time, it provokes anxiety in you, right? So all biological, psychological, as well as environmental causes could lead to anxiety disorders.
I love the name masturbation. I like it.
Yeah, that's actual name.
That's the term. That's nice term.
Yeah.
Also, I think what you addressed about, the should part, you should do this or you must do this. We studied about that as well, and I think that framing effect makes a big difference. I think even when we put certain expectations on ourselves, I should get this done in this period of time to ourselves. Probably,
Right.
we are just able to replace it by saying, if I do this, it'll be good. Or,
Yeah,
you know,
I'd prefer to do it, or I'd like to do it. If it happens, it's good, like you said. Otherwise,
right, correct. Moving on, what are the symptoms
Yeah. As you already mentioned symptoms before, but just further reviewing of our viewers, let's
right.
go to what are the symptoms of anxiety.
Yes. So the common symptoms of anxiety would be when a patient presents that they are feeling excessive worry throughout the day, sometimes for no apparent reason. Sometimes they can't pinpoint what it is that is causing them the worry all day. That worry hampers their concentration for everything that they do in day-to-day life. They're unable to also have any kind of pleasure or in things that they were interested in before or they were able to enjoy. They're not able to do it because they're constantly worrying. Either they're worrying about something that has happened in the past or something that is going to happen in the future, and it slowly starts affecting their sleep. They start either sleeping late or waking up in the middle of the night or having non-refreshing sleep, or they start having nightmares or flashbacks, and it then affects their appetite also. And then it leads to a lot of physical changes also in their body. They always seem to be on the edge. They seem कि बहुत palpitations हो रहे हैं, धड़कनें तेज हो रही है, like I was saying. They might feel tremors all the time, or there might be a nervous energy which will make them move all the time. Or some people who are prone to acidity will feel that their acidity has increased, heartburn they might experience. And they might also have something what we call panic attacks, but I think we're going to cover that later also. So, yeah. And so, all in all of this together will affect their functioning, that they can also realize, and people around them will also realize. And that is when we will label it as a mental disorder.
Perfect. Thank you for summing that up again, ma'am. I think let's move to understanding if there's a relation between anxiety and parenting styles.
So yes, definitely. Parenting styles have a huge impact on anxiety because parenting styles will give you your inner dialogue, your inner voice. The way you think about things comes a lot from parents and how you've been brought up. Like we're talking about the should and must sentences, if there have been a lot of restrictions and if the child has not been given the opportunity to explore and learn from their own mistakes, and if there has been very rigid parenting, then it definitely hampers and can lead to anxiety disorders in the future when the child goes out on their own and in the real world when they have to interact with other people, and the real world is not necessarily going to follow the rules that were followed at their house. So then that creates a dissonance in their mind, and that will have a major effect on their anxiety. It has been seen that parents who give a secure base to their child, secure base ka meaning not just physical secure base, but an emotional secure base, where the child feels free enough to explore and still be able to come back, has that freedom, has that trust from the parents, then those people tend to have anxiety disorders less often as compared to people who have not been given that chance or who have had a very unstable kind of parenting where they're not sure. Sometimes their parents would agree with them and would be available for them, and sometimes they might not be available. And in that kind of parenting, anxiety disorders are more common because even that kind of parenting is a form of psychological trauma for the child. So again, a risk factor for anxiety. Yeah,
Can you take one question from the viewer? It just caught my eye. Uh,
sure.
can ADHD coexist with anxiety? If yes, what kind of impact would they have on the subject?
Right. So ADHD can definitely coexist with anxiety, less often, but it's a part of secondary anxiety rather than a primary anxiety disorder. And we see anxiety in ADHD in little middle-aged older children when they start having a little awareness of their own illness. At that point, usually the hyperactivity would have decreased, but the attention deficit would still remain, and the child in ADHD, more often than not, is usually a normal or high IQ child. So the child has started understanding that I am somewhere different from my peers. Even if I try and focus, even if I try to bring myself to study, I can only concentrate for a certain amount of time. And they more often than not get into a lot of trouble because of that from their parents, from their teachers, as well as from their classmates. And then that starts producing anxiety in them. So it's a secondary anxiety rather than a primary anxiety disorder. And the second part of the question was if yes.
What kind of impact would it have on the subject?
So definitely, it could lead to from that anxiety, it could move on to a depression, and that depression could be very harmful because usually depression and anxiety tend to coexist, and the more severe they are, the child could then because might feel that I'm not being understood, or because there is so little control I have over this, might spiral into even suicidal thoughts, self-harming behavior, or on the other end might make the child give up trying completely and might taking solace in bad company, in getting into substances where he or she is not judged as much. He or she kind of gets along because okay, they also get in trouble, I also get in trouble, we are the birds of the same flock, and then they go into having conduct disorder or ASPD. So it could go both ways, and both of which is harmful for the child. So that is why recognizing the primary disorder being ADHD, treating it on time, getting therapy done would be able to avoid all of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, mm,
what is the difference between anxiety and panic attack?
So actually, anxiety attack is, let's say, a layman term, whereas panic attack is a clinical term. They are both the same things. Now, panic disorder is one more disorder I failed to mention when I was talking extensively about anxiety disorders. Panic disorder is characterized by having short episodes of severe anxiety. It could coexist with any of the other anxiety disorder, and it could be a disorder on its own. These short episodes usually last anywhere between 1 to 5 minutes. and they're characterized by excessive palpitation, excessive your heart racing, you having trouble breathing, shivering, sweating, and there is this feeling of choking where the patient kind of feels that now everything is going to get over. There's a feeling that there's something very bad and big coming, like an impending doom, and it will go away usually on its own between 1 to 5 minutes, but it's a very debilitating experience. It will leave you very exhausted and will leave you very scared. Now, people, all of us, in fact, you, me, all of us may have experienced a mild panic attack sometime in our life, which can happen sometimes. Suppose we are going down a scared, dark alley somewhere and we feel that somebody is behind us, we might experience that for a little bit. But people with panic disorder will experience them in and out, sometimes 5, 7 times in a day, and throughout the day. And that can make them very incapacitated in doing anything. So, panic attack and anxiety attack are basically the same thing, just the way they are labeled by lay people versus medical people. Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up. That's, I think, a very common question that's out there. That is there a difference? Are they the same thing?
Yes, yes.
So yes, thank you for addressing that. Moving on, will you be willing to share a particular case that you came across pertaining to anxiety that you either addressed or you came across?
So, like I said, any which ways, anxiety disorders are the most common ones that we deal with when it comes to mental illnesses. But especially since we are all in this lockdown and in this COVID area, uh, most of the psychiatrists these days are dealing with patients over teleconsultation or video consultation, and we get various calls. And most of them, most of these people will have some other anxiety issue. One case that stood out in my mind was, this was a gentleman who called because he had started, he was a professional who was working and studying currently for his CA exams. And he lived with his parents and his younger brother. And he had never had a mental issue before. And he had gotten our number from the tele consultation helpline, and he called because he had recently started having sleep disturbances, appetite disturbances, and panic attacks because there were altercations between his younger brother and his parents repeatedly happening because his younger brother was not following the lockdown rules as sincerely as he should, and his parents were old, so he was having panic attacks about both things. He was worrying about his younger brother getting COVID and bringing it back, although they were in a green zone and there was no case around them, but he had that genuine worry. And plus, he was worried about how the altercation between his parents and his younger brother would play out in the long term. And although he tried to sort that out, he would talk to his younger brother. The younger brother would follow all hand hygiene, everything, even after having gone out for half an hour in the day. But now he had started having panic attacks even when his younger brother would be at home, anticipating that he might step out or they might have an altercation, even when his parents and his younger brother, having realized, had come to a truce. And he had started having nightmares about those panic attacks and stuff. And per se, he had no other risk factor. There was no family history. There had not been any trauma per se, or and he was a good high IQ educated person with fairly psychological stability. So a lot of times we don't realize how this lockdown and being together and seeing the friction could also have a psychological effect and trauma. And because he had just called us within 3 or 4 days of having sleep and appetite disturbances, initially over the phone we could just give him some practical tips of how to deal with it when there is a panic attack, teach him some sleep hygiene techniques, otherwise kind of make him realize what things are under his control and what are not, and ask him to follow up regularly over the phone. So we were able to allay it, but after a week or two, most of his symptoms had gone away, but he was still having sleep disturbances. So we referred him to a nearby psychiatrist so that he could be started on medication. But this was something that, even though he was following everything, but because of the things happening at home, that I thought was kind of it, both the lockdown and the corona, that could have an effect psychologically playing. Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Environmental.
you. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much for addressing that question. I think we'll take
Yeah.
up one more question that our viewers are asking. One question
Yeah.
is, can you please explain the correlation between anxiety and PMS and PMDD? So, for our viewers, let me just say PMS is premenstrual syndrome and PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
Yeah. So first of all, Samruddhi, both of these terms are actually the same disorder. It's just a new nomenclature that has come up. PMS, premenstrual syndrome, is what it was called earlier and what is commonly known in the layman literature. But the most recent guidelines of mental disorder classification has renamed into premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Why they have done it is because there are certain symptoms that would go better with dysphoria rather than just calling it an overall syndrome. That is why. The main thing why this happens, the correlation is that anxiety is one of the symptoms that we see in PMDD. The symptoms that we see usually are there are sleep disturbances, there is an anxiety component to it, feeling anxious the entire day, feeling unhappy, having crying spells very easily, feeling bloated, being easily irritable, unable to concentrate on things, and it characteristically happens a few days before your monthly periods are going to start. So let's say a week before that. And it has a very strong biological basis because the hormonal changes that happen in every woman's body in during their monthly cycle. So those hormonal changes will affect some people a little more. And the hormones like estrogen and progesterone, which are part of this cycle, also have receptors in the brain and they also act on our mood. So almost all females will might have it on a very milder degree, which might not be very noticeable for some, but for some people it could go to such severe extremes that they're completely unable to function in that 1 week period. And as soon as those levels normalize and they have their periods, the all the symptoms go away. So more often than not, we will suggest therapy for these patients, tell them to realize, accept that it's part of this, and how they can schedule their work around it so that they don't have to get it hampered that much. And we'll also counsel the family members with them, along with them, so that they are more accepting of that behavior at that time. But if the crying spells are too much, if the anger outburst is too much in terms of it is causing a lot of disruption at home, if the person is unable to work at home or at workplace and everybody is getting disturbed, then we will give some medication for it. So anxiety that occurs is mainly biological in this sense when it occurs in PMDD. Yeah. I
There's
hope
also,
that.
right. Thank you so much. There's also one more question that one of our viewers had asked. She mentions a concern that her daughter cannot hear. So now the daughter is having a little stress on how the lip reading will take place because of the mask that the COVID has, asked us to take in our
Correct.
new lifestyle. So how will she encompass with all these difficulties?
Yeah. No, I can imagine it might be a very stressful situation for somebody who, because of having the handicap of inability to hear, might not be able to pick up the body language cues that they usually do. And But I think I don't know how old the child is, but I believe sign language is one more way in which they could communicate with others. And even if lip reading is not possible all the time, but with family members, because usually at home you don't need to wear the masks. Masks are only required when you're going out in crowded places or stuff like that. So at home, lip reading can still continue. And if you are able to teach the child sign language as well as learn it yourself, so maybe that might practically help the child in able to communicate with the others. And I believe since the lockdown is enforced, there might not be that much opportunity anyways to go out for school or to interact with strangers, new people. It will be familiar people only that the child will get interacted with. And if you could teach all of them some kind of sign language, so that might help allay the anxiety, because a more practical approach will be helpful, because it's a very practical, genuine issue that the child is having. And in spite of having learned sign language, in spite of being able to communicate, if the child is having trouble processing it, then definitely you could take her to a counselor, to a child psychologist, who could try and understand what other anxiety it is that the child is having when using sign language. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was great. We'll move to our set of questions. The
Yeah.
next is there a self-help kit to combat anxiety and feelings that arises because of it?
So self-kit help kit is something for anxiety that you could make yourself, rather than having one that is customized probably. But this is something that will generally help a lot of people overall to allay milder forms of anxiety, right? So this self-help kit would mean, first of all, taking basic care of your mental software, making sure that your mind and your circuits are have their housekeeping well done, for which the basics like having a good sleep, making sure that you're sleeping for 7 to 8 hours regularly, because that is the time that the mind does its cleaning work and all its housekeeping work. Making sure that you are eating well, keeping yourself nutrition wise, making sure that you're taking in stuff. Exercise should be a part of your self-help kit. For some people, exercise in terms of heavy exercise and aerobics helps, because that gives them that the high and the endorphin levels increase. But for some people, especially in anxiety, meditation, deep breathing, yoga, these kind of exercises, when done on a regular basis, can help to reset that system that I was talking about, the fight, flight, and freeze system, on a more calmer level, because that system works on the sympathetic nervous system, whereas we need to activate our parasympathetic system more to keep ourselves calm, which can be done by meditation, deep breathing, yoga, all of that. Along with that, writing thought down, like in a journal, your thought diary, kind of, that every day what are those anxiety provoking things, writing them down, and then maybe a day or two later just reflecting back on that. So being able to categorize how many out of these are in your control and how many are out of your control, because once we are able to distinguish that and accept, then it becomes easier to handle that anxiety, easier to tell yourself that. Then there is something about our inner dialogue that we talk to ourselves about. So our inner dialogue needs to have a shift. If there are certain cognitive distortions in our inner dialogue, like we were talking about the should and must things, if we can try and shift those from the should and must to I prefer to, or it would be nice to have it. So that way. So the thought diary also helps us see how many should and musts we put on ourselves and others, and how we can shift those. Uh, a very good exercise is writing a gratitude diary. So a gratitude diary is basically, if you could write maybe 3 or 5 things every night, about things that you feel you're grateful for, and try and make sure that these are different things. And every 2 3 days, go back and just read through what you've written, because reading that to yourself reinforces the positive thing in your mind. Because what anxiety and depression tend to do is they make your focus and highlight so much on the negatives of the life, that you tend to overlook or disqualify all the positives that are happening. So a gratitude diary helps you that ways to work.
The reason why I'm laughing so much, I'm so sorry,
Yeah,
but
no
it's
worries.
very personal because during exam time there's a lot of anxiousness that at least as students we face. So
Right.
maintaining gratitude journal, the inner dialogue, actually focusing, taking 5 minutes out for
Yeah.
ourselves and actually doing that really helps. So that's very true.
No, it definitely does help. Even positive quotes and affirmations, they might sound very cliche, but if you, whatever positive quote you think helps you, motivates you, if you can keep it somewhere, especially students and all, if they can keep it somewhere in on front of their desk where they can see it, and whenever they're down they can look at them. Then you can have something like strength cards, which we tell children to have. Like, very commonly strength cards could be like just a normal playing card deck of card size thing, of a superhero, whoever is your favorite superhero. It could be Captain America, it could be Chota Bheem, it could be anybody that you like. You can draw on it or you can paste on it. And on the reverse side, you can write one encouraging statement. Supposing somebody has stage phobia, so they can just write that, no, I can do it and I'm going to be best at it. And always carry that strength card in your pocket, and whenever you are in a situation that is a little anxiety provoking, you can just come out with it and say that this is me, this is me, this superhero is me, and this is what I can do. So that is kind of helping that inner dialogue change. And another thing that people can do is have a worry time. Like, in the entire day, whenever a worry is popping up, this is not the time that I'm going to worry. My 5 o'clock in the evening is my worry time. So that is the time I'm going to worry. To set aside a 15 minutes worry time. So this is the time I'm going to worry about everything and anything that I want to worry about. And that's what I'm going to do. And most importantly, especially to a lot of younger people, I'd like to say that please do not take solace in any kind of substances, whether it's drinking, whether it's smoking, whether it's weed, whatever it is, because they very commonly go around saying, oh, this will calm you up and this will help you, and but it doesn't. It's just numbing for the time being, and you're just lost for the time being, but it doesn't help in the long run. In fact, it will provoke more anxiety once the effect wears off. So stop self-medicating with these substances. That definitely should be part of your self-help aid. So I think I've covered, said quite a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're loving this, and thankfully we are getting a lot of positive responses too. Basically, thanking you for all the information that you're giving in, and I completely agree.
My pleasure.
I have one doubt. In the worry time that you said, so if
Yeah.
we have to be very time bound because we can then actually get carried away too.
Yes, yes. It has to be a fixed time. You can put an alarm on your phone.
Right. Okay. So being carried away is just like I was thinking, if what if the person who is actually indulging into their worries does get carried away and then thinks more
So
about
you
it.
you put limits there. You can either put an alarm on your phone for 15 minutes, or you can tell somebody at home that, listen, this is my worry time. After 15 minutes, make sure I'm out of this. See, any and all of these things that I'm talking about are going to need practice. Nothing is going to happen overnight or one time, and you are bound to make mistakes when you're doing this, but that's okay. You will learn and realize by trial and error what among these works. One of the important things I forgot to mention is hobbies and creative arts. Like, that is also a good way of allaying your anxiety, also expressing it in a creative way, and soothing yourself. Like, music plays a very big role in soothing yourselves. So calming music can be very helpful. And also imagery. Like, you can think of a happy place for yourself that you would like to, that feels calm and good. It could be a place that you've actually ever been to. For somebody, it could be a temple, it could be a garden, it could be a waterfall where they've gone to, or it could be just an imaginary place that you've been to while you're keeping yourself calm and meditated. So, with regular practice, you might be able to switch your mind to that place in 2 minutes. Like, there are patients who have had panic attacks regularly, but having taught them this guided imagery and by regular practice, they're now able to curb their panic attack just by imagery. They don't need a SOS medication for that, which initially they would. So again, all of these are things that you will need regular practice with, so that it becomes muscle memory. Right.
Thank you so much. The next question is, so pertaining to anxiety, between a mindful and holistic approach and a cognitive based approach paired with medications, which is a better path according to you?
So I would again say it's a very individualized thing. rather than a general thing, depending on what level of anxiety you have and what is your psychological mindedness. There is a concept called psychological mindedness, which means that not everybody is open to therapy or doing homework or wanting to work on their cognition per se, which could depend on the literacy level, which could depend on how they view themselves as human beings, how they mentally view themselves. Because honestly speaking, in Nagpur, in my practice, I see almost 70 to 80% patients from the rural sector who are not very inclined in doing a lot of psychological work. For them it's about, and also because that psychological work, whether it is mindfulness, CBT, holistic approach, it takes a little longer for the effects to show. The effects might be longer lasting and might have lesser side effects than medication, but it needs the client to do a lot of work on themselves, which a lot of these patients are not open to do for the simple practical reason that their livelihood is getting affected. They want a quick fix, they want something. And plus still when people come from that area, they have that expectation, you're the doctor, you're just supposed to fix me, you're not supposed to ask me to do that work for me. So they have that kind of approach also. So what we usually practice is, we will give them some tips and some practical things to do, like the kind of exercises or maybe progressive muscle relaxation techniques and stuff we will teach them. But we will also give them medication to allay their symptoms in the immediate acute phase, so that both their functioning recovers early, they're able to go back to work, and also that helps them stay connected to us. Because if they feel that yes, it has helped, they will stay connected and I will be able to do more psychological work with them. May not be in that structured way like CBT happens, because they might not be that happy with structure, but in subtle practical ways I might be able to have that discussion with them and tell them, okay, try this one thing, try that one thing. But for that I have to build that rapport and make sure they feel that level of fear. As opposed to that, the 20 to 30% people who are more averse to taking medication, the more urban crowd and more Google savvy crowd, let's say, they would have searched so much that but even in that, when they actually go to the therapy, then they come back saying that this is too much work. Is there not a yeah? So I would say it's a very individualized case, and how ready people are and how early they come to us. If it's a milder form, then definitely we insist that you try therapy first, you try counseling first, so that you don't need to be on medications. But in India, given the stigma with mental illness, usually, especially in practice, we see patients who are much, much more severe. So there is no clear cut, I would say, preference, but that's the practice that we have.
Thank you so much for answering.
Yeah,
The next question is from the viewer. Uh,
yeah.
they have asked how to address situations when people around your family or friends are dismissive about your anxiety situation.
Are dismissive about your anxiety situation.
Right.
Right. Right. So a lot of people feel that anxiety and depression are self-imposed. Like you were just feeling it because you're not strong enough, or it's a weakness of sign. It's a sign of weakness, or you just need to man up to be able to. इसमें क्या है इतना, right? So, and that I think is true for most mental illnesses, not just anxiety and depression, but most mental illnesses. Unfortunately, the only way I think that to be able to combat that kind of reaction is to talk to them, tell them that this is a genuine disorder, and if they don't are not willing to listen to you, bring them to your mental health professional, and that they can then convince them that it is a disorder. Because unless there is more awareness out there, it is very difficult for most people to understand why somebody else is behaving in a different way than they are. And most people, anxiety disorders are something that will happen for no apparent reason. That is also one of the main things. It doesn't necessarily have to have an event, except for PTSD, for it to be an anxiety disorder. So in that case, it is very difficult for other people to realize that if everything is going all right in your life, you're doing fine, professionally, personally, what is the reason for you to be anxious? So that is That is why it's a disorder, because it is not in your control. It is not something that you're doing on purpose. And sometimes it's easier for people to understand this when a professional is telling them that, or when a third person is telling them that, as opposed to when you're directly telling them that. So just know that they are saying this because they think that by saying this they are encouraging you to get out of this, or they're trying to push you to be better. They are well intentioned, or being dismissive are actually well intentioned, but it's a misplaced intention. So, there's a saying that says that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It is something like this. So, the best thing would be to take them to your mental health professional, and probably they'll be able to explain that to them better, or show them videos or series on anxiety that happen everywhere, and maybe that will be an eye opener for them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Also, very frequently asked question that we also have added in our set is how how is lockdown affecting anxiety in our lifestyle?
Yeah. So definitely, lockdown has increased a lot of palpable anxiety, and we are getting more and more people getting in touch with us about that anxiety that they're feeling. And it's because for the first time, I think, in our lives, we have come to a situation which is actually out of control for everyone. Like, there is nobody that we can reliably say knows what to expect in the future and how things are going to go. And that uncertainty provokes a lot of anxiety. So that is, I think, one of the main reasons that anxiety is being there, because you can't plan anything. You don't know when schools are opening, you don't know when offices are opening, what the new normal is going to be like. I think, secondly, one of the main reasons that anxiety is all around is lockdown has somehow converted into a competition, like we were speaking about being productive. You will see so many people posting new recipes, new artwork, new skill that they've come up with, and there are people who are saying that, this is, if there are quotes going around that if you don't come out with one new skill or anything new and new, means you've wasted this time. I've read quotes like that. But I want to reassure people out there that it's completely all right to not do anything new in this time except going through your day. And it's completely all right. Again, there is no must or should that you need to have in this situation. And it's all right. If you, in fact, I would say for some people, this is an even busier time, especially for women at home, because there is no help available. You have to take care of your home responsibilities all by yourself. Your children are home all the time. Your husband is home all the time. People, being relatively free, are more hungry all the time. So you are in the kitchen all the time and then cleaning all the time. So you really don't have the time to, for yourself also, that you might have earlier. And it's all right if you're just being able to do that. There is and shouldn't be any competition about it, because, and anxiety is for those two three things, because there are things that are out of control, and because we keep comparing with what is happening around the world. But for both those things, I think for things that are out of control, the best thing would be accepting. Make a list of things that you know are in your control and not in your control. When corona will end, not in your control. Whether and when a vaccine will come up, not in your control. How the government policies go, not in your control. But how you go through your day is in your control. The only thing, if you could do, is if you're able to follow some kind of routine, it gives a sense of control in your hand of the day. That whatever routine, it doesn't have to be a very fixed timetable, but just a rough plan of the day. That, I'll get up around 8, 9 in the day, we'll have breakfast here, we'll do this, we'll do that, have some kind of time to, some half an hour to maybe just play games or do something for yourself rather than just catering to everybody around. Those small, small things you can have control of. And that will help allay the anxiety a little bit. Okay, so the government had extended the lockdown for another 15 days. So another 15 days, this would be my rough plan. Maybe I'd get in touch with somebody, maybe I'd not. That's All right. Again, there is another competition I think that is going on about how many people are calling you up and are checking on you versus how many are not and how many you are calling up. It's not, again, there is no preference there. It doesn't say that, if you didn't get enough number of calls that people don't care, or that if you didn't call enough number of people. Because again, like I said, a lot of people are in different boards there. In fact, there was a very beautiful poem I heard about it, that we're all in the same storm but different boats. So for some, this might be a time where they could actually do something new, and for some, this would be a time to just make survival a struggle, which we hear about. So know of things that you can control and you can't. And as far as comparing goes, again, you don't need to compare with anybody except yourself, and be enjoy just what you are. Normal worries, normal ups and downs are okay to have. No worries.
Thank you so much. That was so well explained and really helped at least feel good and not compare. Takeaways not comparing.
Yeah.
Next question that has been asked is, how will you explain instantaneous anxiety?
Instantaneous anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah. So instantaneous anxiety is something that you have as a reaction to something that has immediately happened, which is very normal and common. It's a day-to-day anxiety. Something unexpected happens, and supposing an accident, you fall somewhere or something, and that can be anxiety provoking, which is normal part and parcel of life. It doesn't need any kind of treatment because it is usually goes away as soon as that stimulus goes away. So
Uh, yeah,
Go ahead.
something. No, it's okay.
No, I don't think there's any other question that we haven't
I
addressed.
see another question here. What says, what's protective anxiety or eustress?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, that's an important type of anxiety that I would like to talk about. It's actually it's the difference between distress and eustress. A protective anxiety is anxiety that is helpful for you, which you should normally have, which is a normal part of your daily life. If that is not there, you're not motivated to do something. Like if the kind of anxiety you have before, let's say, an exam or your performance, or the kind of anxiety we may have had before this presentation. Because if you don't have that kind of anxiety, it doesn't motivate you to do your best. That's but that's a healthy anxiety. It is not debilitating anxiety. It doesn't. It shouldn't be to a level that completely makes you incapable of doing anything and freezes you. Or it is something that motivates you to do your best. So like we did a trial before this because we were anxious to make sure that the live goes well. So if we would not have that anxiety, we would have directly done the live, and there might have been more technical issues then. So just as an example of eustress or protective anxiety. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we've pretty much addressed all the set of questions that we came up with and all the questions that viewers have come up with as well.
Yeah, I think I see another question on ADHD at 5:45 by
I
Ashish
think it's
Mas.
similar to the one that we had addressed. ADHD
Oh,
should
older people in this. Yeah. Yeah, we have that. Thank you.
All right. Having said that, I would again like to thank you so much. I have very genuinely enjoyed this session, except of course for the lag in the voice. It's pretty annoying.
Yeah.
Your voice was clear, and I think that was important. We anyway wanted to hear your inputs.
I was very happy to be here. Very pertinent, relevant question to anxiety, and I was very happy to see the response of
Yes.
people. I was glad that we were able to clear out a few myths. Yeah. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much for being a part of our. Oh my God. Also, I would like to say that if viewers have more, any certain doubts or queries, they can always leave a comment or approach us on our page, Mind and Matter. Even on Instagram, we have a page, Mind and Matter _20. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much,
And
ma'am.
we'll also be uploading this video on our YouTube channel, which also goes by the name of Mind and Matter _20. So if you were not able to watch the whole thing, or if you want to, tell someone else to watch it, you can always watch it on YouTube as well as Facebook.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's about it. Thank you so much again.
Yeah.
I
Thank
think
you.
we'll sign off. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Have a good day.